In this lecture, we're going to learn about multi-dimensional arrays of characters. And this is going to be exactly the same thing we saw in the last lecture. We are only going to be adapting to character arrays. And this is how it is going to look. For example, you can have a grid-like data structure, which is a 2D array, and you can put in characters instead of putting in integers like we did in the last lecture. This is how we can do this in code. We're going to do a two-dimensional array of characters. It's going to be called members. We are going to omit the first dimension because we want the compiler to deduce this, but we have to specify the second one. And inside here, this is how we can put in data. Okay, each row is going to contain characters, and you can put data in like this. Okay, once you have data like this in, you can print this using regular loops. For example, we can put a for loop here, which is going to print each character array inside, because a two-dimensional array is really like an array of arrays. So we can target the inner array with a loop like this and print it out. And if we do something like this, we should see John, Samuel, Rashid, and Rodriguez printed out on the console. But know that this is really unsafe. We don't have guarantees that our inner arrays are going to be null terminated, and this may be really bad. In this case, we may be lucky because we set up an array of 15 characters for the inner array. So for John here, the rest is going to be autofilled with null characters, so this is going to be fine by luck. But if the name we put in happens to have 15 characters, then we're not going to have a null character inside, and we're going to be doomed to get garbage data when we print things out on the console. You're going to see that in Visual Studio Code in a minute. And you can do something like this. We have an outer loop, which is going to loop this number of times std size members. This is going to grab the outer dimension. The inner loop is going to target the inner dimension. So we're going to say std size members and use the inner iterator we are at. And we're going to print using multi-dimensional angle brackets notation like this. And it is going to give us each character. And after we print each name, because this loop here is going to print the name, and we are going to add in a new line character so that things are put on different lines for ease of reading. This is something you can do, and it is going to work fine, but this is not practical. What you really want is not to store characters like this, and it's not going in and print each character like we are doing here. What we want is really something like this. We want to store string literals if we are initializing our multi-dimensional character array like this. We can put in names like this, and this is something anybody on the planet can read and understand, and it is really cool. And the cool thing is we can print each of these inner arrays really nicely using the syntax like this, and it is going to work. It is going to print John, Samuel, Rashid, and Rodriguez, and we don't have to go through the trouble of printing each character manually like we did in the slide here. It is really bad. Okay, this is really all we set out to do in this lecture. It is raising your awareness on cool things you can do with multi-dimensional arrays of characters. You can store data easily like this, and we can take advantage of this and improve our fortune teller application. If you remember, we had to store each prediction in a variable like this, and we had to set up these variables. So, for example, if we have 1,000 predictions, this really becomes unmanageable because we have to manage each of these 1,000 variables manually in the program, and it is not really good. So what we can do is store this information in a multi-dimensional array of characters, or to be specific, a 2D dimensional array of characters. And we can do something like this, and we have the flexibility of adding in data, removing data, and this is going to work pretty well. The only thing that is a little bit uncomfortable is that we have to specify the size here, 90. So if the text happens to be larger than this, we're going to get problems. And we will see better ways to do this later. But for now, we should appreciate how easy it is to work with this. We don't have to maintain 1,000 variables for each of these messages. We can only maintain these predictions 2D array and be on our merry way to work with our program. We are actually going to see how we can do that in the next lecture, but for now, let's head over to Visual Studio Code and see how we can work with multi-dimensional arrays of characters. Okay, here we are in our working directory. The current project is multi-dimensional arrays of characters. We're going to grab the template files like we always do, and we're going to put them in place, and we're going to open this in Visual Studio Code. Let's do that. We should have our main CPP file here opened up. We're going to remove whatever we don't need from our template file, and this is what we want. We are going to go down here and put in the code we're going to use to play with this. We have a variable size t, which is going to store the length of the name, and we declare a 2D array of characters. It's going to be called members, and the first mention is going to be omitted. We saw that we could do that in the last lecture, and we're going to specify the second dimension to be name length. So each name that we store in here should be at most 15 characters. So if you go over that, you're going to go overbound, and bad things may happen. So don't do that. Inside, we can put in data like this. So it is exactly the same thing we saw in the last lecture. It is just, instead of putting in integers, because we had arrays of integers in the last lecture, now we are putting in characters. And you know that a character should be surrounded by these single quotes by now. So if we do something like this, we're going to have this array stored in memory, and if we print it out, we're going to get this data printed out. Down here, we see a simple way we can print data. So we're going to loop over the outer dimension here and print each inner array. We are doing this because you can really think of a two-dimensional array as an array of arrays. So we are looping over the outer dimension, printing out each inner array, and this is how we can do it. And if we run the code, we're going to see these things printed out, but we may not get what we expect. For example, if we have 15 characters in each of these guys, we're not going to have a null terminator, and we might get garbage printed out. Let's try and see what we get from our compiler. The bold is going to go through. Let's bring up a terminal we can work with because we didn't have one opened up. Let's clear and run Rooster. You're going to see that we have the data printed out, but this is because none of these names that we put in here is 15 characters long. So Rodriguez here is longer, so let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's put in 8 more things. Let's say Rodriguez. We can copy this to save on time. Why not? So we're going to do something like this. I am going to paste that in and see if we get Rodriguez printed out. Now you see that even Visual Studio Code is telling me that I have too many initializer values. So let's try and compile this and see if the compiler is going to take it. And the compiler is not going to take it. It's going to say too many initializers. And here the compiler is actually protecting us from ourselves, and this is really cool. Let's take this out and bring this to the way it was before. And now we are going to work with this, and it is going to build. And this is cool. Now we know that the compiler is going to protect us if we try to put in more than can fit in here. But we can try and put in 15 and really fill up all these guys or these 15 slots. And the compiler is not going to fill in the null character. So let's copy this again because I'm not satisfied yet. I want to break my compiler. I want you to see bad things that can really happen here. So how many elements do we have in here? We have 16, I think. So let's take this out. This is going to give us 15 elements. The compiler is happy. Visual Studio Code is happy, I should say. Let's try and build this. We're going to build with GCC. The build is going to go through. So we expect to get Rodriguez and Rodriguez without a Z. Let's try and run and see what we get. We are getting Rodriguez printed out here, but we're not guaranteed to get that because sometimes the compiler is going to not know that this is the end of the string. Okay, but the main thing you should really do is not put in more than you declared the space for. That's the main message here. And this is one way you can do things, but this is unsafe. Don't do this. We are going to see a better way we can initialize our data and be safe. For now, we're going to comment this out and show you a few other things. Let's comment this out and say declaring a 2D array and comment this out. The other thing I want you to see is that you can actually loop in manually and print each character yourself. And you see that the array here has been commented out, so we're not going to get it. We're going to get squiggly lines we don't like, but we can quickly take this out of our comment and put that on top here, and that's going to get rid of the problems. This is one way you can do things. And it is going to pick up the array we just uncommented, and we're going to print it out here. And you see that we are looping with two nested layers of loops, and we're going to grab each character and print it out. And after each line here, we're going to print a new line characters so that these things show up on different lines. If we build and run this, we are going to build fine. Let's bring this up a little bit. We're going to clear and run Rooster, and you're going to see that we get the same message. Now we are manually going in and picking each character and printing it out. This is what we are really doing, but you don't want to do things like this. This is a little bit overkill for just going in and grabbing data and printing that out. We are going to see a better way to do this, and we're going to comment this out again, and we're going to comment this out, and we're going to go down and use C-string literals, proper strings that are guaranteed to be terminated with null characters. And we saw ways we could do that. We could just put them in double quotes like this, and the compiler is going to know the right thing to do. It's going to end each of these guys with null characters, and we are guaranteed to be safe to print them like this. And this is going to be really cool. So if we print this, we're going to run through the compiler, and the build is going to be good. We're going to clear and run Rooster. We are going to get exactly the same thing, but now we are safe because we are sure that each of these strings is going to be properly null terminated. And again, be sure that the names you put in here are not longer than the name length. If you do that, you're going to run into problems. And if you are lucky, the compiler is going to stop you from making such a mistake. But some compilers are not going to stop you. So be careful about this. For example, if we make this longer than what we support, we're going to get squiggly lines, and a value type cannot be used to initialize it. What is happening here? Let's try and build this with the compiler. We're going to go through the compiler, and we're going to get a more meaningful compiler error. We're going to say initializer string of car is too long. Okay, so this is too long. The compiler is going to stop us, and this is good. You want the compiler to stop you from making mistakes like this. Okay, if we have something like this, I think the compiler is now going to be happy. Let's try and build. The build is good, and we can print this out. Okay, so this is really all I had to share in this lecture, showing you ways you can use multi-dimensional or two-dimensional arrays of characters to store text information in your program. And this is very useful. For example, in the next lecture, we are going to see how we can update our fortune teller app to take advantage of this. And we had a problem of storing the prediction information in separate variables. But now we can do something like this. Okay, so we have a single array. It is a 2D array. The first dimension is omitted out. The second dimension is 90. So we expect each of these things to be less than 90 characters. We should be careful about that. But once we do something like this, we can really put in text however we want. We can go down here, for example, and add another line very easily. And say, I don't see anything. You can add things, you can remove things, you can really do whatever you want. And once you have this, you can target each prediction easily using an index like we are doing here. So we can print the prediction at index 5. If we do this, we're going to get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to target this thing and print it out. And this is going to be really cool. I am excited about this, and I am going to show you how you can do this in the next lecture and improve our fortune teller app. If we run this, we're going to see prediction 5 printed out, and this is pretty cool. This is really all we set out to do in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this lecture. In the next one, we're going to improve fortune teller to take advantage of what we just learned about here. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.